Welcome back, welcome back. Was it a good time to hear from some of our folks at Fort McKinley? Was that all right? I tell you, somebody was asking, how do you motivate your folks? You find superheroes like those, and you pull them up on stage, and you make them superstars, and you tell their stories, and you let them be the voice that everyone is hearing. Well, I want to say welcome back. I know now that we are back from lunch, we are all ready for a nap. Can I get an amen on that one? No such luck. We do have some exciting things. I want to address some of the questions I have been hearing from many of you over the break. And one of those, and this may be on your mind, Dave, why did you pull the flag out of the sanctuary? Is that right? Some of the question. Let me share with you a little bit about how that came out. Now, and also understand that happened pre-Dave. So, but let me share with you a little bit about what that's about. The church is not an American phenomenon. The church is a worldwide movement of Jesus Christ into the world. We live in a global society where people travel and where we can get from one side of the earth to the other in a short amount of time. Just last week, Rusty was in Australia for 2 weeks, and we were Skyping back and forth together. So we live in this society where in any moment you can be on a video conference with people in Dayton, Ohio, and they can be a part of your life experience. And so one of the keys for us was to remember that, if we're going to live in this global society, then we can't be exclusive to the people in our communities, in our world. And we have to recognize that not everyone who lives in our neighborhood even is from here. In our neighborhood, we have many immigrants, many people who have come here to work or to go to school. And so we made the decision, and this is, we are not saying that everyone needs to make this decision, but we as a church made the decision that if we are not going to be able to have every flag, then we should not have any flag. The other part of that discussion is that the flag for most folks is a symbol of allegiance. You say, I pledge allegiance to the flag. And so what we wanted to be careful of doing is not sending mixed messages in the church, because we believe that inside the church, our allegiance is to Jesus Christ and Jesus Christ alone. To no one else, not a country, not that it's any less patriotic or that we have any anxiety for the American flag, but in the church we want to be careful not to send mixed messages. And so we have chosen to remove the flag because of its symbol as a symbol of allegiance, and so we would rather folks focus on the cross as their symbol of allegiance, rather than on the flag, and not have any confusion. Does that help? You're okay to say no. It's okay. And like I said, I'm not advocating that this is what everyone should do, but this is the choices that we made. And so I do, however, think it's important that we as churches are wrestling with our own theologies. Wrestling with, why do we do what we do? Why is the stuff on the stage there? What is it speaking? Some of the stuff on many of our altars and our stages are there because it's been there forever and nobody remembers who put it there or why they put it there and can't figure out what it stands for anymore. And we go to great lengths to change the colors on our altar table, and nobody has a real concept of what those colors are all about. So if we're not going to speak those things, do they hold value for our neighbors anymore? And so I guess part of why I bring up the flag thing is not to challenge you to mess with your flag. Maybe that's not a hill you want to die on. But I do want to challenge you to wrestle with, as you walk in the building, say, what is our building saying about our God? Much of my passion for the local church came because when I was serving in Gordon Church, remember that small little rural church in the middle of nowhere, I was driving, we had no parking. Our building was falling down around us, and we weren't even on the main street in our little town. So the three things they say you have to grow a church: a building, parking, and location. We didn't have any of those, none of them. And I would drive on my way to seminary by this church, and it was painted bright yellow. I'll never forget this church. And this building was about 3 times the size of ours. It had this incredible parking lot that butted up against this community park, and it was on the main street as you go from Dayton to Greenville, which was a major thoroughfare, right on that main street in town. And yet I had folks in my church who had family members who went to that church, and there was 12 people going to that church. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with having a church of 12 people. But I'm saying in that location, with that opportunity, with those resources available, there's no excuse. There is no excuse for that. And what frustrated me so much was that I'd drive by there every day and I'd realize that the neighbors in that community were basing their understanding of who God was based on that church. Based on what they were seeing out of that church. And so the picture you could imagine that they were seeing was a God without power, a God without resource, a God without authority, a God without the ability to change and make life transformation happen in our communities. And it so frustrated me that I said, man, my thought was, if we have the resources of heaven at our disposal, if we have the example of Jesus Christ, and if we have the power of the Holy Spirit behind us, what is our excuse for failure? What is our excuse for not reaching out to the people Jesus loves the most? And so this is where some of my passion came from. I want to talk this afternoon to all of you as leaders. You are here because you are a leader. Maybe you're a pastor, maybe you're a lay leader in your church, but you would not have given up St. Patrick's Day to be in this church conference if you were not a leader in your church. I believe that with all my heart. So I want to talk to all of you leaders, and I want to ask you this question. If money were no object and failure was not an option, what could your church do to transform and empower your community? If money were no object and failure was not an option, what could your church do? I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to talk to somebody, talk at your tables or talk with the folks around you. What could you do if money were no option and failure was if money was no object and failure was not an option? On your mark, get set, go. One more minute. Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. One more minute. All right. I am very interested to hear what some of you would do if money were no object and failure was not an option. What could some of your churches be doing if you had all the money in the world and failure was not an option? Somebody share with me. What could you do? You'd buy a bunch of property and build low-cost housing. Okay, good. I like that. Yes. You'd build a community center. Excellent. What else? Yes. Okay, so you'd add on to your church so you become a resource center for the community, an emergency shelter type of deal for your community. Okay, I heard somebody else over here. Scholarships. Well, who would you scholarship? Scholarship them to do what? Go to college or? Okay, cool. Yeah, what would you do? Job training and GED training. Cool. Okay, what else? Oh, I hope y'all are working on dreaming big dreams, church. You'd encourage and empower your neighbors to visit, your church members to visit their neighbors. Yes, ma'am. What would you do? Okay, a daycare for single mothers. Okay. Safe houses for prostitutes and addicts to go. Yes. There, in your county, there would be no child that would go hungry. That's a big dream right there. Now we're starting to get there. Yeah, what would you do? A small business incubator. Cool. Well, here's the reason I asked that question. I get that the reality for all of us is that money is an option and failure happens from time to time, right? I mean, I get that. However, I want to challenge us on that just a little bit. I want to challenge us to think a little differently on that. Because I guess if I'm going to be honest with my theology, I got to come to a place where I say, you know, if I'm truly following Jesus, and if my church is truly doing what my church has been called to do, then is money an obstacle? No. No, is failure an option? If we are willing to be obedient to the call of God in our lives, is failure an option for us? No, it's not. I think where we run into money issues and failure problems is when we're trying to do the stuff we're not called to do, or we're trying to be who we've not been called to be, and we try to make things happen that God isn't asking us to have happen in our churches. Uh-oh, I have just stepped on some toes. One of the things I know, tripped over this big elephant when I was coming up on stage on my way up here. One of the big questions on all of your minds is, yeah, that's great, Dave, but you have Gamesburg. Can I get an amen on that? Somebody here's thinking that. All right, some of you are brave. Come on, Dave, that's great, but you have a mega church behind you. Of course, Fort McKinley can do great things. You know, money isn't an option for you, and failure is not an option for you either, because you have a mega church. If I had a mega church, we would be rocking for Jesus too, right? Well, here's what I want to share with you on that. please remember that where my first place of ministry was Gordon Church. This little town church in the middle of nowhere. And what God was able to do in and through that little church, this Heal a Church, Save a Community initiative, that we started with very little resources, with very little focus. And so what it took for us was some leadership, was some a willingness to follow Jesus, was some big dreaming kind of thing. So for us, it wasn't enough at Gordon Church to say, we're doing pretty well here at Gordon Church. People are coming. Our attendance has quadrupled in the last several years. We're doing pretty well, paying our budget bills, paying our apportionments. Bishop's happy, everything's going well. That for us, that wasn't a big enough dream. We had to keep dreaming, and so we realized that we're not successful if the churches in our neighborhoods were all falling down, and the neighborhoods that surround us were failing and struggling. And so we decided we're going to have to dream bigger dreams. I'm here telling you that Fort McKinley today is who God has called it to be, not because it's associated with a mega church, but because the people you saw on the screen earlier decided, because they chose, because they voted. Oh, are you with me on that one, church? They voted to say, we will follow Jesus. We will be who God's calling us to be. No more excuses, no more giving up, no more giving in. Now, I do want to say, people ask me all the time, could you have done at Fort McKinley what God has done at Fort McKinley without Ginghamsburg? And my honest answer to that question, I get that question all the time. My honest answer to that question is, I don't know. I've never done it. I'm about to. In 3 weeks from now, we're launching a new church all on our own, and I have no clue, Bishop, how we're going to pay for this thing, and I'm really worried, and I'm going to be preaching on Saturday nights there and Sunday morning at Fort McKinley, and Bishop, I'm like, oh, Lord, you're going to have to jump in on this one because I can't do this by myself. So we're things there. Now, I do, however, have a hunch, and here's my hunch. The answer to the question is yes. Everything that Fort McKinley has done could have been done without Ginghamsburg, just not as fast. What Ginghamsburg offered Fort McKinley was speed. We had the ability to change music on day one. We had the ability to tear out some infrastructure and put some new infrastructure in. We had some abilities. We had some speed in doing things. However, there isn't anything that we've done that church couldn't have done if it decided. Once it decided, this is what we're called to do. I truly believe that in my heart, and we are about to find out here in a couple of weeks if that bears witness and if that rings true. So for all of you who are serving in churches, large, small, medium-sized, rural, urban, suburban, I want to encourage you leaders that if God has called you to it, God can pull you through it. Oh, somebody write that down. That was pretty good there, Richard. You like that? It even rhymed. I'm going to have to start preaching here sometime. Now, here's the deal. I think at the end of the day, for me, it comes down to leadership. And when I say the word leadership, I don't just mean the pastor, but I mean the leadership of the people, community leadership, leadership in the church, leadership in the neighborhood. Success in ministry comes down to leadership. Bishop, is that what you've found? It's about leadership? At the end of the day, if you're buying real estate, it's location, location, location. If you're building a church, it's leadership, leadership, leadership. It all comes down to that. I am waiting for the day where I find the place where this proves me wrong. But I am waiting yet to find the church that is dying and struggling and doesn't have an issue of unhealthy leadership. so far, and all of the consulting and all of the times I've spent on the phone and visiting other churches and bringing me in to coach and these types of things, every case I've ever found has an issue where the leadership has given into fear, failed to lead forward, failed to move. And so today I want to talk a little bit about leadership to all of you here in the room. This is certainly not a subject that I have fully figured out. I'm living into this. I do have a bit of a leadership style that sometimes is a healthy one and sometimes appears like a Mack truck. My wife just gave me an amen. She is the one who reminds me of my potential to run people over if I don't manage my own leadership style. So I have to be very careful of that. But at the end of the day, great churches are led by great leaders. You saw a panel full of great leaders in my church. Those people were chosen because they are leaders, because they have demonstrated a heart for following Jesus. I mean, you heard Marilyn Hess say after 70 years that we came to realize that change had to happen fast. Fast. I mean, how many 70-year-olds do you know who aren't you usually hearing them say, why don't you kids just slow down, right? Right? But not Marilyn. She's a leader. She understands what this looks like. So today I want to share with you what I call the 4 C's of leadership. These are the 4 things that I am learning and am beginning to incorporate into my life. And the first C of leadership is every leader is called to challenge. As leaders, we are called to challenge the status quo. We are called to challenge what has always been. We're called to ask hard questions. We're called to ask, what is our theology around having a flag in our congregation? You know, wherever you land on it, you're at least called to wrestle with it. You know, we are called to challenge not only the people in our congregation, and we get pretty good at that as pastors. We know how to challenge our folks. The question is, do we know how to challenge ourselves? Because at the end of the day, all leadership starts with self-leadership. And we will never be able to lead people farther than we have gone ourselves. We become the ceiling as leaders for the capacity of our people. And we become the end point. And so I know that if that's true, boy, I've got to stay out in front. There are people on this panel that we just saw who are great leaders. And if I don't ever want to be the stumbling block that makes them say, this is as far as I can go. So a great leader is always willing to challenge herself or himself. A great leader is always willing to push and put yourself in uncomfortable situations. Let me give you an example. Julie, would you hand me that frame there? This frame hangs on my wall in my office. This is a sermon I wrote. It is the very first sermon I wrote when I got to Ginghamsburg Church. Bishop, this is the first sermon I preached in front of Mike Slaughter, who had been my preaching hero for a long time. And I brought this in. At Ginghamsburg, you don't just show up on Sunday and preach. There is a process. It's a process called worship design. And it begins months and months and months before as we begin to build an understanding of where we want to go with the sermons and what does our congregation need and what are the felt needs of our community and what are the truths that need to be spoken. And so we begin to massage that and then we begin to tweak it a little more and get a little more clarity around what it looks like. But as far as what it looks like in a week, we have a team of people that show up every week on Wednesday. We call our worship design team. At Fort McKinley, all of our worship design team are unpaid servants. Vanessa Furry is on our worship design team. You met her. And the worship design team's job is I bring my sermon in on Wednesday. Did you hear me say Wednesday? I know some of you are like, whoa, I didn't write my sermon until Saturday. I bring my sermon in on Wednesday, and it is their job to tear it to shreds, to destroy. It's their job to say, oh, Dave, when you said this thing, that didn't make any sense to me at all. Or, Dave, man, your head is way too much in seminary on this piece. I need you to speak plain language to me. Or that story that you told didn't make any sense in this place. And it's their job. You know, how many preachers are in the room? Raise your hand. Can I just tell you how heartbreaking that is every single week? I mean, you know what it's like. You put your heart and your soul into this thing. You pour out your emotions and your very life experiences out onto this page. You give birth to this thing every week, and you bring it in, and it's like somebody calling your baby ugly. You know, the worship design process is the hardest but most valuable thing I do every week. It's the hardest and most valuable thing I do every week. Well, this message was for the very first time I was going to preach at Fort McKinley Church. It was on Pentecost Sunday. And so the sermon, the title of the sermon was called Birthday Wishes for the Church. Okay, I know, sounds lame. It was. First line, happy birthday, church, and it goes on from there. I'm in this worship design process with Mike Slaughter. And Bishop, you know Mike a little bit, right? And Mike is a great mind and has zero ability to be tactful ever. And so I get about 3 lines into this sermon, and he pulls it out from underneath me, and he says, "This sucks." And I'm like, okay then. Well, and for the next hour and a half, he begins to tear this apart piece by piece. Piece by piece. Just tell me, well, you know, how I missed this thing or missed that thing or the other thing. I got to be honest with you, I was devastated. Here's one of my heroes has just kicked this thing right in the teeth, and I am just absolutely heartbroken over this thing. And I went home and I told Juliet, I don't know if I can do this every week. This is too hard. This is too painful. I don't think I can deal with this kind of challenge. And I am so thankful for Paul Jones. Some of you know Paul Jones. He was playing keyboard here earlier. Paul Jones was on our Ginsburg staff at the time. And you know what Paul said to me? He said, "Dave, you don't have to be an A until Sunday. You don't have to be an A until Sunday." And that saved my life. So as Mike was tearing this thing to pieces, he said, if I were your I had just graduated from seminary. He said, if I were your seminary professor, I'd give you a C-. And he wrote C- on this page. C-. And that's when Paul said, well, don't worry, Dave, you don't have to be an A until Sunday. So I go back, and every week we do this. We meet together on Wednesday, and then we meet again on Friday, and we do it all over again. Twice in 1 week. And so I bring it in on Friday. I've poured and what I realized between Wednesday and Friday was, you know what? He's kind of right. I kind of phoned this thing in. I've preached this sermon every Pentecost that I've been preaching. You know, it's all the same stuff I've been preaching. I didn't really work hard on this. I didn't go to God for this. I pulled out of my own resources, not out of God's resources. So I worked really hard, and I brought the next version of this in on Friday. And when I was done, I got a little more than 3 lines in before Mike chimed in, which was exciting for me. But I get to the end, and he goes, well, you know, I'll give you a B on that one. And Paul looked over at me again, and he goes, remember, you don't have to be an A until Sunday. And so by the time the next week I brought this message back in with me, and I asked Mike to sign it. I don't know if you saw his signature on there and he said, why do you want me to sign this? Where he had put C-. I said, Mike, here's the deal, man. When I am dean of Ginsburg Seminary, and I am kicking the butts of the preachers who are studying underneath me like you're kicking mine, I want to be able to pull this message out and say, see, I've been there. I know what you're going through. So this message hangs on my wall in my office, and it reminds me every day that as leaders, we have got to be willing to push ourselves, to challenge ourselves, to allow accountability into our lives. Some of you are in cluster groups and accountability groups, and I hope for you they have become more than friendship groups, or worse yet, places we go to complain about our churches. I didn't say that, Bishop. Don't. None of these people do that. It's only in West Ohio that they do that. But we have got to be willing to challenge ourselves and challenge ourselves, because the level that we are able to lead will become the ceiling for our churches. And so, church leaders, I want to encourage you to keep pushing. I'm proud of you for being here today. I hope some of what you've done this weekend has been a bit of a challenge to you. I hope that you won't just go home and say, oh, that was nice, look what they're doing. But I hope you'll really wrestle with, what does this mean to me? What are those transferable principles that I can employ at my church? What is it that God is calling me to do that I don't know how comfortable I am doing it? The next C of the 4 C's of leadership is the C of change. All leadership is about leading change. At the end of the day, that's what we are in the business to do. We're in the business of changing lives. We're in the business of changing minds. We're in the business of changing hearts. We're in the business of changing behaviors. We are in the business of change. That heart, hands, and head thing that Rusty did with you, that is, as leaders, that is what we are called to focus on. How do we change people so that they become more like Jesus and less like the world and less like they would like to be? And change is painful. Church, can I get an amen? It is so painful. You heard the language that Marilyn used when she talked about some of the changes and the pain that they went through. Change is painful, but it's necessary. If we don't change, we die. If we don't move, we fall behind. Fort McKinley shrank from 600 to 40 because it refused to change. It was unable to change when the neighborhood changed. Now, let me give you an example of why that is so important. At Fort McKinley, when I first got there, my job, like I told you earlier, was to come in and make all of the changes that Mike Slaughter had promised would happen in this church. So I got to be the bad guy. Very exciting, right? And so as we began to change, one of the things that needed to change was the Sunday school system. The adult Sunday school system was an inbred kind of broken system where it was more of a clique than it was a tool where people could come and learn about Jesus. It was an unhealthy system, and we had identified that. And so we knew we needed to make some changes. And let me show you why. Julie, will you hand me this? In the basement at Fort McKinley, this banner hung in one of the Sunday school classes. The Sunday school class's name was the GCC. Now, the bishop will give you $1 if you can guess what GCC stands for. God's Chosen Children. That would have been a great name. That was not, however, the name of this class. What else you got? GCC, what does it stand for? God's Community Club. That's a little closer, but no, not quite. God's Community Crusaders. We're getting there, but no. I wish God's Chosen Children, God's Christian children. Well, let me put you out of your misery here a little bit. This banner stood for the Gay Christians class. And now, let me pause for a second. Before you think to yourself, wow, how progressive of that community. Not so much. These people, this class was established in the 1920s when gay meant happy. Okay? And so, rather than change the name, because change is hard, we'll just abbreviate it. Because we all know what it means anyway, and we're the only ones coming anyhow, and we're the only people who will ever know what this really means. So all we have to do is abbreviate this. Church, we've got to change. We've got to make some change. Remember when I said you got to be able to speak the language? This is what I'm talking about. So what we realized was that I told you there were 2 adult Sunday school classes, right? This was one of them. The other one was the YUMPS class. YUMP. Yeah, apparently that was a big thing back then. It stands for Young United Methodist People Serving. Sounds nice, right? Sounds all right. Nobody in that class under 70. Okay, nobody. Can you imagine? So I knew going in, man, if we're going to be a church that reaches out to its community, we're going to have to make some changes. And one of those things that had to change was the Sunday school system. So here's what I did. I told all of the people who were in these Sunday school classes, there was about 25 of them in each of these Sunday school classes. I said, listen, I need you all to be leaders in this church. I need you to set an example for everyone who's going to be here. When you voted and said yes to merge with Ginsburg Church, all of you automatically became members of Ginsburg Church. So I'm not asking you to take a membership class. I am asking you to go through our Followers Life class, however. It's our 12-week membership class. Not so that you can become a member, but so that you can understand what this church is all about, what we believe a Jesus follower is. Because you are going to be the leaders in this church, I need us all to be able to speak a common language. And so I said, for the next 12 weeks, I need your 2 Sunday school classes to join our Followers Life class. And they agreed to do that. Now, I also told them, if you don't agree to do this, then we're going to shut down your class, and you can continue to meet as a cell group in your homes, but this class will not exist any longer at Fort McKinley. And so they all joined the membership class, and so what that did was it gave me 12 weeks to reinvent our Sunday school system, to put in place new short-term classes that didn't become cliques, to ask what are the needs of our community. And so now we have a Bible 101 class for people who are walking in for the very first time and couldn't find Matthew if you gave them a page number. We have a class, a Ministry by Strengths class, that helps people to discover who God has created them to be. And we have all of these short-term classes now. Now, there was some weeping and gnashing of teeth when the Sunday school classes went away. But I think if you were to ask Marilyn today, pretty smart of me to put this after Marilyn's gone now, isn't it? So now you can't ask her. But if you were to ask her today, she'd tell you that was the right move for us, because we were so inward focused, we didn't even know how to reach out to our community. So church, as leaders, we are called to be change agents in the world, agents of change in our communities. The third C is to construct. Every leader is in the building business. Rebuild, restore, renew. We are all in the construction business. When you said yes to following Jesus, you said yes to be in the construction business. And so we are called to build things. One of the things we build are teams. We build teams of people. Several of you have asked me today, how do you manage all of the committees that all of our churches have? Our people are so busy on committees, and I said, we don't do committees. Committees are, we have a leadership board of 12 people that functions in the HR, in the PPR, in the trustee, and in the finance areas that the discipline requires. 12 people manage all of that for all 3 of our campuses as a leadership board. What that does is it frees my folks up to be able to build what they've been, not to be stuck in meetings all day, but to be building out there, building and be a part of teams. So we put together short-term teams. If somebody has a ministry vision, something they want to do, my first response is, find me 3 other people who have a vision like yours, and let's put together a team, and we'll make it happen. everything we do in team. One of the reasons Rusty and I are here together is because I work very hard never to make sure I never do any of this kind of stuff alone. We've got to be training and teaching and mentoring and growing and offering opportunities for folks and having teams around us. That's why the worship design team process is so important, because there are folks on my team who see things differently than I do. One of the guys who couldn't make it to our panel discussion today, he's on your paper. His name is Eric Ross. Eric is come to Fort McKinley in the last 2 years. He and his family have. Eric spent 4 years in the penitentiary, and so he has a perspective on life that I will never have. I hope I will never have. Let me say it that way. He is able to see things from a different perspective. Now you got to understand, in my neighborhood, how valuable his perspective is. And without Eric speaking into me every week, Dave, this is what our folks need to hear. Dave, man, that man, what you're saying, man, our folks will never get that. You say it this way, or try this thing or that thing. When Eric speaks, I listen because he's on my team, and having people around me is critical. So we've got to be about the business of building teams. We're also in the business of constructing systems. Every healthy church is a system. Now, notice I don't say an organization. Now, there's some organization to systems, but systems are much more organic. We all have an organic system in our body. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, how does somebody get from their living room to be a true follower of Jesus? What is our system that brings them from totally separate from God into a deep, committed relationship with Jesus Christ? What system do we have in place for that? Or does that just happen accidentally? Are we just hoping it'll happen? We have to be builders of systems in our churches, that we see from beginning to end how we walk people into this relationship with Christ. So for us, our system is simple. We call it celebration, sell, and call. Celebration, sell, and call. And what we say is that you become a Jesus follower by living in a life rhythm of celebration, sell, and call. That if your life, and these are not things you do individually, or, okay, I've done celebration, now I got to do sell, or now I got to do call. These are a life rhythm. That if I can answer the question, where in my life am I celebrating? And celebration is about worship, both public and private, corporate and on my own. It is the worship that we do in church on Sunday mornings. It is the time I spend with Jesus at 5 a.m. It is where am I worshiping on a regular life rhythm in my life? The sell is about who are the people around me? Who is my support system? That cell group. That community that holds me accountable, or that discipleship process that I'm in. Where do I learn? Where do I grow in cell community, in groups of folks to become who God has called me to be? And call for us is about living out of your call and giftedness. How am I giving back? How am I taking who God has created me to be and turning it into a miracle for somebody else? How am I using my strengths and the assets that Rusty talked about earlier and deploying those to change people's lives? So the system that we've built at Fort McKinley, if someone asks, Pastor, I'm brand new here. I don't know anything about church. I've never owned a Bible. I don't know anything about this thing. How do I be like one of these Jesus followers? How do I be just like Marilyn Hess? What I tell them is, you live in a life rhythm of celebration, sell, and call. And at this church, here's what that means. It means come to worship every week. Be in worship as a part of your life rhythm. Take one of our transformation journals. It's a weekly study through the Bible that we give in our bulletins every week that people can have so that they're in their Bibles more than just on Sundays, but every day. So you're in this life rhythm of worship. Get into a cell group. I'll introduce you to our cell group coordinator, and I'll put you in touch with folks who'll be a part of your community. If you're not quite ready for a cell group, I teach a large group Bible study on Tuesday nights that is supposed to be a precursor for cell groups. My goal is that nobody ever stays in my Bible study more than 6 months, because when you're in Bible study, you were sitting at round tables together, and we're building relationships together. And as I see those relationships forming, I'm constantly saying, hey, why don't you guys go off and form a cell group? You don't need to be here. You guys can do this on your own. You don't need me to babysit you. Go form a cell group. You can do this. We'll resource you. We'll give you what you need in order to make this happen. And so be a part of a cell community. And then live out of your call and giftedness. For what that means is serve. Everybody at Fort McKinley can serve. You don't have to be a member to serve. Some of the greatest success stories we have are with folks who started coming to breakfast, and then somebody handed them a spatula and said, here, why don't you flip an omelet for a while? Why don't you try this? And as people begin to live into they're called to realize they have something to give back, that they have some assets to offer. All of a sudden, their lives are opening up. They're living into the framework of the church. So we are called to build teams, we are called to build systems, and we are called to build partnerships and networks. Now, at the end of the day, I cannot do all the stuff that Fort McKinley does all by itself. I can't do it. I don't know how to write a grant that's going to bring $6 million to my neighborhood. I don't know how to do that. That's why I need Adam and Greg to write those grants. And I know how to be a partner. I can do some of that stuff. But I've got to be in the business of building partnerships, building community connections. Several of you have asked me, are there other churches in your community that you're partnering with? Is that on some of your minds? That's a great question. And let me tell you a little bit about how that has worked for us. We have been very successful at building partnerships with government. We've been very successful at building partnerships with nonprofits and local business leaders. We've been very successful at building partnerships with community groups in our neighborhood. Very successful at building those partnerships. The hardest partnership that there is to build is church to church. Can I get an amen on that? Am I the only one who struggles with that? What is that about? Why can't the church work with each other? I mean, I'm not just talking across denominational lines. I'm talking about even within our denomination. Why do we struggle with that so much? There are 3 churches inside our 15 blocks besides Fort McKinley. All 3 of them are small, predominantly African American, independent churches. And we have had varying degrees of success with each of them. With one of the churches, we have a very great partnership with them. They're called the Glorious Light Church, and they are excited about what's going on. When I first told their pastor about Project Neighborhood, he told me, son, our people are too old for that kind of stuff. We don't want anything to do with that. I said, all right. And so I didn't think about it again. And so that next Saturday, a big group of our folks were out in a yard right next door to their church. And their associate pastor came over and he was asking, hey, what are you guys doing? Who are you? What are you all about? So one of our team leaders told him about Project Neighborhood. And this associate pastor, Bishop, came marching into my office on Monday. You know what he said? He said, I don't care what my senior pastor says. Next time you do Project Neighborhood, we're in. You call me, I'll send our people out. And I just thought that was great. Since then, we've been able to build a partnership with them so that they're partnering with us on the community festival that we do every summer, and they're beginning to come along. Now, the other 2, we have been less successful with. One of them, doesn't want anything to do with us because we are that big church on the corner that's stealing all their people. That's their perspective on who we are. The other pastor of the church, I met with him when I first got to Fort McKinley. And as we talked, he is frustrated. He is tired. He is worn out. And he told me, son, people in this neighborhood hate church. You'll never have more than 50 people in your church. And I said, you're probably right if that's your attitude, right? And so we have not been successful with that. And the reason I bring that up is because I was having this conversation with somebody in the hall just a minute ago. I've begun to become very convicted that partnerships are two-way streets. They're two-way streets. It takes both partners. And it's one thing for Fort McKinley Church to invite other churches to partner with us. You know, wouldn't that be great? You know, big success story, right? But am I willing, as the pastor of one of the largest churches in that area, am I willing to hear about what the 22 people from the Glorious Light Church are doing? And am I willing to partner with them on what matters to them? Am I a part of the problem with churches not wanting to partner with other churches? So as leaders, part of our call is to build partnerships and to have the humility to be able to say, you know, at the end of the day, we're not in the business of church building. We're just not. We're not in the business of church building. We're in the business of kingdom building. And if people find Jesus Christ in your church or in my church or in somebody else's church or on a porch in the neighborhood, that's what we're in this for. That's what we are all about. We built a partnership, like I said, with lots of business leaders in the community. Everybody who we thought had a vested interest in this, in our 15 blocks, we wanted to build a partnership with them. And we have begun to see some incredible results. You've heard about the 25 homes that are being built. Habitat for Humanity has committed to build 3 homes over the next 3 years in our neighborhood. There are incredible resources being brought to bear in this community. But I want to show you a story of a couple of partners of ours that when they got to see the vision of what Fort McKinley was all about, said, we want a piece of that. So check out this.
My name is Darlene. Back in December the 31st of 2008, I prayed and asked God to take the taste of drugs and alcohol away from me because I got tired. I have tried and tried and tried for so long to change my life, and it just didn't work, and I got tired. And I have been now sober for a year, and I've been coming to my church, to Fort McKinley, since October 2008. At the time, living on Falmouth, the roof was leaking real bad because my landlord did not want to put a roof on the house. It was just so bad. And I prayed, and I had been praying and praying and praying, and then just one day they hooked me up with Main Campus and with Brandon.
My name is Brandon Godzik. I work for a company called Mangan and Associates. One of my coworkers in the office, Jason, he belongs to Ginghamsburg and mentioned that they have a project going called Project Neighborhood.
Yeah, Dave Hood came up. He had just become the pastor of Fort McKinley, and he came up to the home campus at Ginghamsburg and was speaking with the congregation. And one of the things he was talking about was renovating the neighborhood and this Project Neighborhood that they had going on for the church. At the same time, our company had been looking into options about reinvesting in the community and beginning to make a difference in different areas, and so it just lined up very nicely.
So we sat down with Dave, interviewed some families, talked through where their situation was, how we could possibly help them make their situation better in a more warm, welcome environment, and then started, work with a real estate agent and walked through with the families and said, will this house work for you?
When I went to look at my 6 houses, I looked at some nice houses, and I looked at some areas I didn't want to be in. The one on Maple Leaf, it touched my heart because I kept saying it's got potential, it's got potential.
The house really was in pretty good shape. We had to do, basically we took out all the carpeting. The walls were in need of paint. Structurally, the house was pretty good, except for the bathroom. The bathroom, we did a complete remodel of the bathroom.
I knew the house had potential. I knew it had potential. And I've seen it as it was transforming, and then the day we moved in, it's like my heart just went poof. It exploded.
When you start fulfilling all of the needs that the neighborhood has, both the physical and the spiritual, that's when things really grow.
To walk in that house, I felt home. I didn't feel like I was going into somewhere where it was just a piece of a shack. This is a home. I look forward to going home now. When I'm gone, I'm like, well, I gotta go home. And I'm like, when I walk up that street, I'm home. I feel home, and God has put me to where my home is.
I think now that the first one's done, we can see, it took us a little bit of time, but the mission vision can be accomplished very easily. Talking with Dave, there's going to definitely be more in the future, and we want to eventually get this whole, there's 15 blocks here that we want to really make a big impact on. And I can see that happening fairly quick if these same dedicated people keep working. We'll get this thing rolling quick.
You know what that whole thing cost me? Nothing. Didn't cost me a penny. What it took was sharing some vision with some folks, building some partnerships with some people, putting some people together and saying, let's watch what God can do through you as you live into your God calls. And none of that cost me a thing. Today, Darlene is one of our key servants in our children's ministry. She is a part of our Circles initiative, which is, she is a circle leader, which means she is developing relationships around her to begin to attack some of the issues of poverty in our neighborhood. And Darlene her life has been empowered and transformed, not because we poured a lot of money into her, but because of the partnerships and the relationships that we were able to build in and through her life. Well, the last C that I want to share with you, I think is the most important, and that is the C of courage. You've heard me say this 3 or 4 times over the last 2 days, that as leaders, at the end of the day, it comes down to courage. One of my favorite verses is Mark chapter 6, verse 50. This is Jesus coming across the lake. The disciples are terrified. There's been a storm. They see Jesus coming, looking like a ghost, and they're freaking out, and they're not sure what is going on. And Jesus says, "Take courage." Now, I love the way Jesus says that, "Take courage," because notice he doesn't say, "Be brave." Notice he doesn't say, "Buck up, buckaroo." That's the Greek. Notice Jesus doesn't say, if you were just a little braver, then you could do what you've been called to do. Sometimes we think courage is something people are born with, or a personality trait, or a leadership style, that you either possess or you don't possess. That's not what Jesus says. Jesus says courage is something you take. He says, you need courage? Here, take some of mine. I've got enough to go around. I've got everything you need. All of the resources you're worried about, I've got those. I own the cattle on 1,000 hills. I've got everything you need. All of the vision that you need. I took care of prophets for years. What makes you think I won't take care of vision for you? Just ask me for it, and I'll give it to you. All of the teams you need in place, the people you need. God says, you just do what I'm calling you to do, and I'll bring those people. So just take courage. Take it out of my hand. I have enough courage for you to go around. And at the end of the day, church, we have all wasted a weekend if all this was about was storytelling. If you just go back to your church and say, hey, I heard about this cool church in Dayton, isn't that fun? And we don't do anything about it. Jesus says, now that you know, you will be blessed if you do. Now that you know, you will be blessed if you do. And in order to do, it's going to take some courage. It's going to take people like Vanessa and Paul and Marilyn and Don and all of these folks who had the courage to vote yes. Courage. Is that a courageous vote? That was courageous. It's going to take leaders like you and I being able to cast those big dreams and saying, folks, don't worry. I know you're scared. Take courage. I love it that Vanessa told you that when she first heard about the Point, this new church opening up, she was mad. We're not ready for this. We don't have enough servants in our own ministries. What makes us think we're ready to start a new church? She was mad. And yet Vanessa was able to take courage. I'm not here to tell you to change your leadership style or or to just be more brave. I'm here to say rely on the one who has the power to do all that God is calling you to do. Rely on the one who is able to make you and transform you into the person God is calling you to be. And rely on the one who is able to do more than we could ask or imagine. I love that verse. Because I don't know about you, but I got a pretty big imagination. I dream big dreams. I have big dreams, and the Bible promises me that God is able to do all he said he could do. Everything he promised, God can do. And exceedingly and abundantly more. God, I just pray that you will send your Spirit down to my sisters and brothers here in Holston. God, empower them and raise them up. Give them courage and vision and direction. Surround them, God, with people who will encourage them. God, I pray that you will bless their leadership, their district and conference staff. God, I thank you for a bishop who cares enough to be in and among the people and serving this church. God, I pray, Lord, that you will rain down in a powerful way on this conference. Let there be stories that emanate from this place that blow people's minds all over the world. Let this be the conference, and let these be the leaders that are on the cutting edge of that next new initiative that you have planned, that are dreaming bigger dreams than they ever dared to dream before. And God, help them to see the church the way you've seen it. Help us all, God, to be the kind of church that is good news to the poor, that binds up the brokenhearted, that is release for the prisoners. God, we want to be that church, and we ask for your help in Jesus' name. Amen. We have a few minutes left, and so I want to invite Rusty back up. If you'd grab a mic, Rusty, and I want to spend a little time. If you have some questions, we're going to stick around after worship as well. So if you want to ask some individual questions, but if there are some questions you think maybe a bunch of people in this room might have, I'd love to wrestle with those. Yes, ma'am. Right. Okay, if you're in debt and you're not even making your budget, first thing I would suggest is you got to do the same thing you'd do if it was your family budget. You got to look at what doesn't need to be there. You know, what is it that we're doing? Where are we spending money that maybe doesn't have to be spent? This becomes a stewardship issue where my theology tells me that all of the resources necessary in order to accomplish the task that God has set before us are either already in our hands or just waiting to be uncovered. So the first thing I would do is I would do a hardcore assessment of my budget. And I would say, okay, where are we spending, and do we have to spend here? Are we spending this because we've always spent it, or because there's some very clear missional need here? The second thing I would do is I would begin unashamedly teaching on stewardship. Teaching on stewardship. Jesus talked more about money than almost anything else except for the kingdom of God. If Jesus talked about money, why don't we talk about money? At Fort McKinley, we have found that though we are in a very heavy poverty community, heavy poverty-laden community, our people have no lack of want to give. Our people, I get offering envelopes almost every week with $2 in it, and the address line says homeless shelter. You know, our people want to give. As a matter of fact, statistics tell us that people in poverty give percentage-wise more than people in wealth. We have to speak that as leaders. It becomes our job to speak those truths into our people. Money follows mission. It doesn't follow budgets. And so it's important that we help people to see where their dollars are going. So every week when we take our offering, we help to remind people that today when you give, God is going to turn your dollars into a miracle somewhere in and through this church. And we may talk about our children's ministry or our music ministry or some outreach thing that we're doing, or and we help people understand that you're not just giving to keep the lights on. You're giving, and God is turning your dollars into miracles. And so we talk unashamedly, not just 1 month in October about money, but all year long, 365 days a year. I meet with the top givers in our church once a year. I take them out to lunch, and we talk about I don't ask them for money. We just talk about the mission and the vision of the church. I also meet with the next, I got the top 10 the top givers here, and then there's this next core who I believe could be given more if they could really catch the vision, and I meet with them as well, and I share the vision with them, and so I work hard at stewardship. At Fort McKinley, it's the only way we survive. Ginghamsburg does not pay for Fort McKinley. Fort McKinley pays for Fort McKinley. So we have to cut our budget, live within our means, but then raise our means by means of stewardship and education. Does that make sense? What else? Other questions that you might have? Yes? Yeah, Rusty, you want to talk a little bit about how we work in to serve our community, the stuff outside of our church, how we get started in that?
Sure. A lot of the stuff that we do is done through New Path, which is a nonprofit that has come out of Ginghamsburg, and it sounds like you're saying you're not sure where those people are in your neighborhood, and there's not one already happening in your church. So I would recommend doing a little bit of consulting. Find a community near yours where there is some good community service and social services happening. And connect, begin to build some relationships. Just like we've built partnerships with some other folks, begin to build some partnerships. Say, hey, we want to reach out to our community. We want to be the hands and feet. And maybe they're faith-based, maybe they're not. You can learn a lot from either place. And have them come in and go visit them and kind of do some of that learning. Now, on a very grassroots level, so that would be a way to maybe begin some more hardcore social services. If you want to just do some get to know your neighbors and learn what the needs are in your community and where the assets and that kind of stuff are, I would put together a team like our Neighborhood Allies that their job is to just walk the neighborhood or the community drive, whatever the layout of your land is, the people that you call your neighbors, to spend some time in that space getting to know people and kind of figuring out what it is that people need, and that'll help maybe who we need to talk to begin to develop some kind of service and that kind of thing. So that would be two approaches that I would say would be great ways to get started.
Yeah, one of the things that the prayer walks that we did accomplished, I told you we'd spend the first 15 minutes kind of doing a little bit of training. Here's how to do a prayer walk. We'd send them out for an hour, and then we'd come back and debrief those. One of the things that would happen is that as we would debrief what we saw, what we heard, and what we felt, we would begin to see not only what our community was passionate about, but what the folks in our church who were doing these prayer walks were passionate about. Now, all of a sudden, 3 weeks in a row, Vanessa's coming back like, we have to have a speed bump on Evansville. I am hearing this all over the place, and she's passionate about this. So now I'm sending Vanessa to the township meeting because she's passionate about it. I'm sending her to the township meeting, and now all of a sudden we've got the ball rolling for some of this stuff. Some of it just starts very grassroots. One more. I got time for one more question. Yes. Absolutely. The question was, would we have had the equal growth had we not changed the style of worship? And the answer is absolutely not. Wouldn't you say that's true?
I would agree, and I think one of the reasons is because people would come for a great breakfast, or whatever it was that initial sort of reputation builder was, that hook, and I think they would come to worship, and then they would say, "Man, that doesn't connect to my life at all." That's not my language. That's not music that I like. I know we talked about not having a consumer culture, and we're sort of moving away from this attractional church, model. But at the same time, you got to give people an experience that one is excellent, and that two, that is transformational, that's impactful for where they're at. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to do the 5 songs that we did today, or that's the answer for your community. You know what I mean? But you got to learn what does connect for your community. What is the style of music and the style that could connect with them? That they could say, hey, I feel I maybe listen to music kind of like this at home, or I can connect to that. That part of our job is to figure that out for those who we call our neighbors, and then begin to shift that direction. Because if people come and I would say this again for my own generation, it's not that we don't like hymns, or it's not that we don't like some traditional elements. I have some great friends in their 20s that, man, they love a good reading. They love a good creed. Turn off all the freaking noise and let's just get to some truth. So the style is not the only thing. You really got to get to know people in your community, and that'll help you know what it is that people need. But I agree with Dave that if all we did was emphasize the neighborhood stuff and kept worship the same, I don't think that there would be the same success, the same retention. Yeah. And
people. We see that model all over the place. So when we're out visiting and consulting with church, we see churches who are excellent at connecting people with worship, but have no connection to the needs of the community. And so they become these music centers or preaching centers with no real connection to the social side of it. And John Wesley said there is no gospel but the social gospel. So we see that on one hand, but we also see the churches who are doing excellent community outreach. They have food pantries, they have clothing shelters, they have all this kind of ministry going on, and they call Rusty and I because they can't figure out why there's nobody coming on Sunday morning. And then we show up on Sunday morning and we go, oh, that's why your music stinks, or it's not, or it's at least not the language of the people you're trying to reach. And so I think we see a lot of churches here and we see a lot of churches here. What we don't often see is the churches who can balance the two. Find that precious balance between being a place where you're going to come in and meet Jesus in a transformational way, but the reason you've come in is because there are some needs in your life or some assets that you have that are being addressed through the community of this church. Does that make sense? Well, folks, I am excited about this next session. I'm excited to be with our bishop and to spend some time in worship together. You want to come tell them what they're about to do and how they're supposed to do it?